How are you doing? It is the end of April. It's like April 28th, 2020. Let's talk payroll. Are you in the DC metro area? Washington, DC, Virginia, or Maryland? We call it the DMV around here because everyone's kind of around the same area. And oftentimes people will live in a certain state but work in the district, or live in the district and work in a state. Depends how you want to negotiate the traffic. The point is, there are three states. It's the tri-state area, even if one of them is a district. It's the District of Columbia, Virginia, and Maryland. We're going to talk about payroll. There are timestamps in the description below that tell you which minute of the video are related to each state tax and how to fill out this file. So use that guide if you don't want to sit through all of this, because this is going to be a pretty long video. But let's talk about it right now. So the least expensive and best payroll solution on the internet is this. Call me on it because it's pretty awesome. And let's talk about how you enter in information, how it figures tax for you, how it helps you file reports, how it makes controlling your small business at your fingertips. It just makes it awesome. So let's talk about Payroll 2020. Entering in information for your employee. Let's talk about me. Let's pretend that I'm an employee in Maryland. You get to choose. In Maryland, there's a county tax, and I have a bunch of county taxes over here for Maryland. So if you're in Maryland and you have a supplemental county tax in addition to the state tax, these are all the counties over here. Let's assume that I'm in Maryland. Let's assume that Chuck Brown, who's passed away, unfortunately, is not in Maryland. Let's assume that he is in Washington, D.C., and he pays unemployment in Washington, D.C., because you're going to be able to have both unemployment and state tax as options here that you choose in the employee info master sheet. We also have info in here about W-4s and 2020 W-4s and a whole bunch of information. I've done other videos on that. We're not going to focus on it right now, but this is how you kind of start to enter in information. There's also daily information where you're going to put information about the hours for the employee per day. So Chuck Brown that we just added, let's assume that he really worked hard, put 35 hours in on a day, let's say on January 1st. Let's give him some hours. Then let's move over to the pay periods records sheet. This sheet talks about every single pay period record. And the file that we're in right now is for a business that pays twice every month. It's really semi-monthly, meaning on the 15th and probably the last day of the month, that's when this company issues its paychecks. So in this scenario, there's a paycheck on the 15th and on the 31st of January. All your hours and everything you had came in from the daily sheet as you had entered it over here. So this stuff populates automatically. Light colored blue cells are for you to enter in data. Dark colored blue cells and black cells are where there are formulas and you don't need to enter any data because it's coming in there automatically. We have some areas for different types of compensation and hourly rates and check numbers. And what I want to talk about here are the different tax rates that are related to each different state. So for example, in the DC metro area, you've got Washington, D.C., you've got Virginia, you've got Maryland. Let's talk about how you calculate Washington, D.C. tax. Washington, D.C. tax, you need to figure out an annual wage. Like you need to annualize your wages for the period. So in this instance, we're looking at a semi-monthly file where there's a paycheck twice a month. So there are 24 paychecks in the year. So you take whatever the paycheck gross wages were for the period, you multiply it by 24 because there are 24 periods in the year for this payroll period, and then subtract out $4,250 per allowance, per DC allowance. That number is an estimate because I was unable to find the actual DC allowance for 2020. I assume it's $4,250. It might be $4,200 if they didn't change it from last year. You can't find it on their website. Try. You can't find it. So I think it's $4,200. It's close enough. You subtract that from the annualized wages, and then you apply this formula to it. This formula is going to say that of the first 10,000 in wages, only 4% is taxed. The next 40,000, or from 40,000, from 10,000 to 40,000, $400 plus 6% of the difference. There's a formula here. I could give it to you or paste it in the comments below if you need it. But this formula is going to figure out DC withholding tax. So DC tax is a little higher than some other states. Let's talk about Virginia, for example. What if your employee is in Virginia? I mean, you have the options here of putting your employee in a specific state for the state tax, and also what state are they in when it comes to unemployment tax. Because some employees will be residents of a certain state like Virginia or Maryland, but they will commute and go to DC for work, and their unemployment will be recorded in the District of Columbia. And that's really you have to play. They could work in Maryland, but have unemployment in DC. So that can happen. Your employees that are in Virginia, however, what are their taxes? Well, what you need to do is you need to annualize the wages. And then there are a couple different exemptions that are related to Virginia state employees. They are over here. Your Virginia standard deduction is $4,500. I believe that's what it is for the current year. Personal exemption is $930, and your over 65 or blind exemption is $800. Those figure into this formula here to figure out what your annualized wages are. Then you apply this formula to it, which has to do with, are the wages less than $17,000? If they are, $720 plus whatever the amount is minus 17. If it's greater than $17,000, $720 plus the amount of wages for the period, for annualized wages for the period, minus $17,000 times 5.75%, divided by the number of pay periods in the year. This is what this formula looks like. Not going to get too into it, but that's how that works. Then you have Maryland. Maryland is much more complicated. You see, I need actually 6 different columns to do Maryland. You need to annualize the wages. You need to figure out what 15% of the taxable gross is. You need to figure out what the standard allowance is. You need to figure out what the tax would be for a single person, what the tax would be for a married person, and then figure out what the final tax is. And then you've got local taxes, which we have over here that we talked about before, that you would need to enter in your Maryland county rate. So that's complicated. So with all 3 of those states, you have 3 different ways to do that tax. It's all in this file. If you're interested in this file, go to kenbraverman.com and you can get one. Now, after you've entered in, you have all these different formulas in here. You can see that within this file, you just enter in information about the hourly rate, the bonus, whether there are garnishments, reimbursements. Everything's going to be automatically filled in for you. Your pay stubs are going to be filled in for you. You're just going to be able to click the date, click the name, and you're going to get a paycheck. You're going to be able to see your reports, your quarterly reports. You choose a quarter over here. If you don't want to choose a quarter, you just want to choose like a month, like, oh, what do I owe for March? You just click March. It's going to show you owe nothing because we don't have any hours in there, but let's say January, because that'll be a month that has activity. You see that it will fill in automatically and show you what all your employees have. We need to put an hourly rate in there for Chuck Brown. I think that's the problem. It tells you need to put an hourly rate for Chuck Brown. And you can see that now all of a sudden Chuck Brown has data over here related to his tax. We also have state taxes over here. You can choose the state and choose the quarter, and you're going to get information about each state, what work or district, what they owe over here. There are other pivots that you can right click inside and refresh, and it's going to give you all of your reports for your employees by quarter, by month, by whatever you want, using these slicers over here, Q1, Q2, Q3, whatever. It's very easy to use. You also have W-2s that show you what your year-end totals are, so you can file your W-2s online. And I have a W-4 simulator, and I have a matrix with other information. So anyway, that's basically how this file works. It can handle, I'm working on all 50 states, even though 13 of them or so don't have tax or something like that, or 10 at least. But I have a file that can handle almost everything. This one's got District of Columbia, Virginia, and Maryland. If you have any questions about it, you're interested in, contact me, and we can make your payroll as easy as possible. It can handle more than 10 employees. It can handle hundreds of employees. This is a fully functional Microsoft Excel file that can handle everything. So payroll should be easy. Make it so.